I feel like we should get like an opening bit going from time to time.
Maybe
eventually.
we should probably also script out our social medias, so we don't have to randomly kind of bumble through them.
Interesting.
Actually,
that is definitely an option. If you want to get on that, then feel free.
Yeah, sure. It'll take me like 2 minutes. Not right now, because we're actually doing the thing.
Yeah, obviously. Speaking of our socials, you can follow us on... Well, actually, we should probably introduce ourselves first. I'm Connor.
And I am Sam.
And we are the Dungeon Bros. We love talking about Dungeons and Dragons. And this podcast in particular, we will be talking about Dungeons and Dragons.
Both the Dungeons and the Dragons.
As we often like to do.
As we are one to do.
Yes, you can find us on Dungeon Bros YT on TikTok, as well as YouTube. Thus, the YT in our name.
YouTube.
You can follow us on Twitter. You can also follow us on Twitch. We're not going live right now, but if we do, we'll be there. Also, you can join our Discord server. And I want to shout out, we had someone that isn't one of our friends, someone that we don't know, join our Discord server.
Yes, it's very exciting.
Very exciting. I want to give a shout out to this person. Not because they joined the Discord. We're not going to do this for everybody. But because their name is Send Me Hentai.
I saw that.
Yep. I would like to reiterate that the rules of the Discord do state no NSFW or sexually explicit content or images of gore. Specifically.
Gore specifically.
Yes. So, alas, we will not be able to send you hentai. I also don't tend to have hentai available to send at a moment's notice.
Yeah, nor do I. So
yeah. So
not to harsh anybody's mellow. It's just not my thing.
Very good. So, Samuel.
Yes, that is me.
You know of the existence of one Brennan Lee Mulligan.
Yes. I enjoy watching Brendan Lee Mulligan. He is an inspiration when it comes to the chaos of running D&D for me.
Very good. Recently I found a YouTube short that came across my feed where they were asking, they were doing an interview with Brendan Lee Mulligan. And they asked him a question that really got me thinking. It made me put on my Sherlock Holmes hat, if you will.
Okay.
Figuratively. I don't own one, though. That would be rather cool. If you were to bust a nut in the Astral Sea, would the force of the nut propel you equal and opposite, as we know in the laws of physics, equal and opposite reaction?
Yes.
Forces, all that jazz. I think it's like the third rule of something. I don't know. I'm not in high school anymore, so I don't remember. In your learned opinion, studied, cultured, some might say, if you were to nut into the Astral Sea, would you begin moving?
Right. So, of course, this question has a number of factors that you must consider. And I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding between the question being asked and the idea behind it. The question being asked is not taking in the correct lore of the Astral Sea. It is taking in the physics of a vacuum and of space, where in space, if you push that way, you go, or if you blow air that way, you will go that way, equal and opposite.
Yes.
That is. So if you bust a nut in space and you were able to be outside of your spacesuit
and breathe and not die or freeze to death, or
all of those things, yes, that would happen. The Astral Sea, if my memory serves correct,
it often does.
It often does, yes.
Often doesn't as well, but
that's a different story. But in the Astral Sea, I believe movement is done by power of mind. So, if we're saying the action of busting a nut is what would move you due to physics, I would say no, because there's no physics in the Astral Sea. But the thought of that you need to get to climax.
Indeed.
That is a very powerful set of Astral Sea propulsion, I would say.
Now, that is a very intelligent answer. For my answer, I will instead say both you and Brendan Lee Mulligan are wrong. Yes, you are propelled by thought in the Astral Sea. And what is a term that we have for thought beyond the nut, if you will? Post-nut clarity. The post-nut clarity. I feel that the state of mind that you enter in post-nut clarity will indeed propel you through space in the Astral Sea. As the Astral Sea knows. It knows what you just did in it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's well aware.
Yeah.
And it would want you to get away after what happened in the Astral Sea.
So you're saying that this actually might be a plane shift.
Yes,
the Astral Sea will just plane shift you out of there.
100%.
You have defiled the Astral Sea.
The nut would propel you backwards through the plane shift back into either your native plane, or possibly it may want to take revenge and thus put you on, say, Pandemonium, if you will.
That being said,
still
not necessarily the force of the ejaculate.
Well, very fair. Very fair. I can allow that. Moving on. Samuel.
This has been a conversation we have had.
This has been a very good conversation. I've ruined my life recently.
Okay, be more explicit.
I downloaded onto my phone
yes.
a game. If you are a fan of D&D on TikTok, you have probably been made aware of this game at the very least. Magic the Gathering, specifically Magic the Gathering Arena, the mobile version. And I can feel it taking hold in my life. I didn't play it today, and I feel like I'm missing out on my dailies, and I don't like that. I love the concept of dailies in theory. In practice, it just gives me anxiety. Not a fan. That being said, Magic the Gathering is quite a good game. It's quite a fun game to play. There is also an entire set recently released this year of Magic the Gathering cards completely surrounding D&D. Mm-hmm. And I have, not seriously, toyed with the idea of how fun it would be to do live streams of opening packs of D&D Magic the Gathering cards in an attempt to collect the entire set of D&D Magic the Gathering cards. I'm not going to ask if it's a good idea.
Because you already know my answer.
Because I know that you're going to say it's a bad idea.
Yes.
And I'm inclined to believe you.
Good.
But have you ever thought about it not being a bad idea?
I mean, if you are interested in opening the packs of cards because you want all of the cards, sure, go for it. Don't expect this to be,
Look, I've seen a lot of TikTok pages. I've seen a lot of YouTube pages. The live stream pack opening as well as the pack opening videos, very popular. Mm-hmm. Very popular. Mm-hmm. Not to mention the resale value of these cards. I mean, this cardboard, we're talking like 5 to 10 per card. 5 to 10 being cents.
Yes.
Per card. With other cards being as much as 5 to 10 whole dollars. Some, not all. Very rare. But I would imagine that a nice card binder with all of these D&D Magic the Gathering cards, the full set, a lot of them being hollow because, you get the rare one, you get the hollow cards. You're gonna have a nice little set there that on eBay might go for a decent amount of change, a good chunk of change. I probably wouldn't sell it because it would put a lot of work into it.
Yeah, that's
but an eventual, when they become vintage in a decade.
Another thing we could do is presumably you will have, unless you just have the best of luck and some random god gives you every card you want on the first the first set of openings, we'll probably have a lot of random Magic cards.
Oh yeah, we will. Yeah, we will. Copious amount.
Copious amount. What I've always thought would be cool to do is do a resin pour table, and you have some sort of. When I was younger, I had a menagerie of Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, and Digimon cards.
Digimon cards? They had cards.
They had cards.
Wow.
My mother made me get rid of them when I was like 12.
That's bullshit.
Right?
I need to have a word with her.
Yeah, like if I still had those today, I would probably not sell them because they'd probably be beat up and worthless. But if I would like to do a resin pour table. I think that'd be really cool. Be a great nerdy addition. Yeah. And the table we have over there, while functional, is kind of ugly.
Yes, the coffee table is a right nasty piece of shit.
Yes.
It functions as a table,
especially once you fix the leg on it, and it no longer just fell apart. Falling apart.
What's the table if it doesn't fall apart from time to time?
A regular table.
Very good. My brother, back when we lived together, he built himself a desk, much like I did. And he did a resin pour on top of comic book cutouts. I'm not sure if he actually cut out comic books. I think some of them were actual comic books, but I feel like some of them might have been like printouts of comic book covers and stuff. And he had this menagerie of superhero and Star Wars characters poured on underneath the resin that he poured on the top of his table. It turned out quite well. If you are willing to undertake this task, then feel free.
Well,
I will allow it.
So, I mean, of course, this is assuming you do the card openings. Like, I'm not really just going to go out and buy packs of cards when I'm not going to.
I mean, you still have Yu-Gi-Oh! Pokemon cards. You can make a nice end table at the very least.
No, all of my cards. When I was 12, my mom
all of them.
All of Yu-Gi-Oh! Pokemon, Digimon cards.
Oh, man. I'm sorry, bud.
My blue eyes.
So,
anyway.
This is a Dungeons & Dragons podcast where we like to keep up to date with the goings-on, the news, as some might say, of the Dungeons and the Dragons. Oftentimes, we're probably not going to have a meaty subject to dig into, like the Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, or like the G4 D&D television show that we talked about on episodes 1 and 2, respectively.
Yes, unfortunately, a lot of D&D news is very slow coming just due to the nature of the beast being...
And sometimes, you get a lot of shit in a week. So
that's true.
And then we'll have a jam-packed one. But for this week, a couple small things that I want to get to. And then Wizards of the Coast put out a article requesting opinions on D&D spells, presumably for an updated version of 5th edition, a 5.5 edition, if you will. But before we get to that, first we have from comicbook.com, Wizards of the Coast is apparently setting up to release a new mini. A shocker to us all, I know. This miniature is very special, horrifying, and I both really, really want it, but never want to witness it in my entire life. And that is a large miniature of the Elderbrain Dragon.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Which, as we discussed in our Fizban's Treasury of Dragons episode, terrifying creature. Terrifying. Borderline an abomination. Not in creature type, but in existence. And my question for you is, how much do you think this miniature is going to cost? And then how much money would I have to pay you to not buy that miniature just to torture me at home?
So based on the fact that I don't look at large miniatures that often, well, huge miniatures that often, the one I do have was given to me as a present.
Very nice one.
Very nice one.
Very nice one.
But I mean, I was at the game store this past weekend, and glancing at some of the other dragons they had, most of them were clocking in somewhere between $50 and $70. So I'd imagine somewhere in there, $50 or $70. And I would say, well, if I'm planning to throw an Elderbrain Dragon at you anyway, it's probably going to be at least triple to make me not buy it. Otherwise, I will accept
a small loan of $1 million.
Or you buy Canes a couple times.
I never go to Canes.
Guthrie's.
It's out of the way. It's an abomination, and I don't want it in the house. But if it is going to be in the house, I will probably purchase it myself.
It is an adorable slime puppy.
I mean, you're allowed to be wrong about that. And you
will
are.
Breathe tadpoles upon you that will turn you into a mind flayer.
That's hot. Moving on. GeekTyrant.com.
Yes.
You know Hasbro.
I do know Hasbro.
The company Hasbro.
I am familiar with them.
Apparently, they have a production company as well. As Hasbro E1. And apparently, Hasbro's E1 is developing, quote-unquote, several programs in D&D Universe. Now, when I hear D&D Universe, I have a lot of questions. Is this a G4 situation where they're going to be doing a live play D&D show? This distribution, as we discussed in episode 2, this distribution channel going to be a lot better than television. At least my guess would be. But the fact that they specify D&D Universe shows makes me believe that this is going to be a series of shows that may take place in Eberron, may take place in Strixhaven, may take place in the Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance, etc., and so on. Would you be interested in a television show? Single series, mini series, full run multi-season show in the various D&D universes?
I'd be hesitant to jump into any of them. I mean, turning a lot of pop culture things that are not traditionally television and or movies and they're interactive into passive sorts of media. League of Legends just had their show Arcane just come out recently on Netflix. Dota did that this year as well, I believe, and a couple others. And those are definitely, if you're not part of the fandom, it's very hard to get into. I know because I tried with the Dota one. I haven't tried with Arcane yet. I've never played League of Legends.
From what I've heard, Arcane is very good even to non-League of Legends players. Okay. I think is really the key there.
And I'd be kind of so my real curiosity is how they would do them. Would they do them in this animated style? Would they do them in a live play sort of ordeal? Furthermore,
given that it's Hasbro, sorry to interrupt.
No, go for it.
But given that it's Hasbro, and their production company is called E1, I would assume it would be animation of some kind. That's kind of their wheelhouse. I think it'd be a bit weird for Hasbro to announce a live action Eberron show. I could see like Netflix or HBO doing something like that. But given that it is Hasbro, I feel like animation really is the way to go, and that's what I would expect.
Ultimately, each of these different D&D universes has a different feel. They've been created over many different years and have been created with many different purposes. Like, for example, Ravenloft, very, very much created to be horror or spooky.
Very Castlevania.
Yeah. Others have been created to be just pure fantasy. Some have been
your Forgotten Realms, your Dragonlance. Yes.
Yeah, some have been created to be more colonial. Some have been created. Yeah. There's so many. I would be curious as if they were to do them. How would they differentiate them?
I agree. I think a lot of them have enough difference inherent in them that it wouldn't be that big of an issue to tell. But what I would love to see, don't make it a bunch of shows. Make a long one season and have like, here's episode 1 and it's in Eberron. Here's episode 2 and it's in Ravenloft. Here's episode 3 and it's in Strixhaven. And like they jump around to all the universes and they just kind of very loosely tie things together. And then you have this epic season finale of someone, say like Jace the Mind Sculptor, a Planeswalker, starting to collect people from different universes and then create a multiverse. Kind of speed ahead to what the MCU is doing.
With What If.
A little kind of like What If.
Yeah,
kind of like What
pretty
If.
much. Yeah, all the different universes finally being collapsed upon because the Watcher watched.
And even if they're doing a series, several of these shows, doing them as mini-series that can then converge together in a multiversal sort of way. The multiverse of D&D, very vast, quite vast. And a lot of interesting interactions can happen. You can establish these different material planes of existence. You can establish the concept of things like the Feywild or the ethereal plane, that kind of stuff. And then much like D&D adventures, where it's like, all right, we're saving the town from a pack of gnolls, to, all right, we're traveling to Pandemonium to rescue our unconscious friend that drew a card from the deck of many things and their soul is trapped in a gem in a tower on the plane of Pandemonium. Search for Grog. I think if you're going to really properly do D&D and not just an interesting fantasy universe, you got to take advantage of that. And I think if they're going to be setting D&D shows in the various material planes that are existing in D&D proper published works, I mean, at that point, why not have them crossover? I think we are spoiled for choice when it comes to crossovers these days. It's been a crossover decade for sure.
I actually, something I just kind of thought of and I'm very curious about is, so I play in a Star Wars D&D campaign, and there's a big difference because, I mean, the systems are very different anymore, but D&D can really be anything. I mean, I've watched you run some games. You've played in a game I run, and we play in another friend's game and together, and they're just all vastly different. But with the Star Wars one, no matter even if you're just a casual Star Wars fan, you kind of know about Star Wars. Like there's a thing to know, and you can, point to a thing and say that's not how Star Wars works. I'm very curious as if they started with these TV series, like, oh, these are official realms of D&D, like how that will change the perspective of people who start playing D&D. Like maybe somebody watches these shows because maybe it's a great animated show and you can just hop in and it's really fun. And then somebody starts playing, D&D and a longtime DM who maybe hasn't watched the shows or wants to continue playing the way they've always played goes, this is my world. And they go, that's not how it is in Eberron.
It'd be weird to have an Eberron show. It would be weird to have an Eberron show without Warforged. It would be weird to have a Theros show without the Greek gods or without the lion folk, the Leonin. I don't even remember. That might be what they're called. I don't know. So, if they stay true to the source material, if they stay true to the setting, which I'm sure they will. A lot of them are kind of generic fantasy.
That's true.
And So, I think they'll be cool. If it has decent distribution and the shows aren't shit, I might watch them. Moving on. The bulk of today is Wizards of the Coast. They have an article up as we record it on November 30th. It'll likely be up as we post this. But they are requesting people fill out a survey about the vast array of spells in the player's handbook. This survey asks some demographic questions. It asks, but the bulk of it is asking your satisfaction level with a slew of spells out of the PHB. Now, it doesn't touch on absolutely every one of them, but there are quite a few. It took us a while to go through all of them. It also asks if you have ever cast these spells in-game, both as a player and a DM, or if you never have. And it seems like they're trying to get in as much information as they can about the spell book of D&D to tweak some things, make some changes for an eventual reprint of the player's handbook for a 5.5 edition, which I think absolutely should happen. Let's start with what kind of spells stood out to you as shockingly good or shockingly bad upon a reread, or any major exclusions from the list that they asked you about.
So going through, I found that a lot of the spells that I was giving the either very strong thumbs up to or the very strong thumbs down to are just kind of the popular spells that we talk about in everyday D&D or that you see memes about online. Things like I'm surprised they asked about Revivify.
Yeah.
Like Revivify. It's a fine spell. I don't know if I have a strong like or dislike of it. But then it's like,
They did have pretty much all of the resurrection spells on the list to review, which we can get to in a moment. But
yeah, like the things like here, actually the low level spells were the ones that I was finding going, yes, these are the ones that I like, that your Eldritch Blast, your other cantrips like that, guidance, the ones that I don't want to say became popularized in online shows, but the ones that were definitely exemplified. And then the ones that we've always talked about being bad,
True Strike.
True Strike, yes.
Resistance.
Yes. Yeah. Those are the ones that really stood out to me.
Okay.
What about you?
What stood out to me isn't really the inclusion or lack thereof an inclusion of certain spells, but what I was finding myself rating the various elemental damage type spells. Your Fireball and Flame Strike and Burning Hands versus your Lightning Bolt and, incidentally, that's kind of about it, your Cone of Cold. And I think this is a good opportunity for, at the very end, there's a box to type in any opinions that you have. And one of the big ones that I brought up was the differences in fire type spells versus every other elemental damage type, and how fire has gotten a whole lot of love. There's a wide variety of spells. There's a lot of overlap in use case of various fire-based spells, which kind of makes some parts of the lists for fire spells particularly unnecessary, especially after third level fire spells. Like, why would you cast Flaming Sphere over Fireball in most instances? Mm-hmm. Yes, Flaming Spear lasts on the field, but it's very similar. And when you look at comparable spells of different damage types, fire always seems just to be better. This is me really sounding the klaxon, if you will, for my beloved lightning damage. Big fan of the lightning damage, as you know, my wizard Lucian in your game. Big user of the lightning type damage. And the quintessential lightning spell, Lightning Bolt, 3rd level spell, is meant to be kind of the antithesis or a spell of elemental damage type at 3rd level to Fireball. And the damage on Lightning Bolt is very good. But the key flaw in Lightning Bolt is that it is a line damage spell. It is a 5-foot line. I think it would be a lot more useful if it were a 10-foot line. But it is a line spell, making it very difficult to line up more than 2 creatures at a time, which with Fireball, you can consistently be hitting 3, 4, 5, 10 creatures if you space it out properly. You can fix that with other elemental spells. Your Cone of Cold, but what level is Cone of Cold?
Cone of Cold is pretty high up there. I can't remember exactly, but...
Yes. Chain Lightning. What level is Chain Lightning? It's level 7.
It's level 7?
You know? And Chain Lightning, a great spell, really should be like a 4th or 5th level spell. And maybe knock a dice off of the damage. It really comes... When you get to these damaging spells, it's usually single target versus AoE. And one of the quintessential single target D&D spells, Disintegrate, primarily fire damage. One of the quintessential AoE spells, Fireball, fire damage. And it really isn't a benefit to branching out and doing these different elemental types. Your Sleet Storm, a little bit of ice damage, and it helps with knocking concentration. Interesting effects on other elemental damage types, but if you're running just damage, you really run fire or you don't do anything.
It's also to note that in the monster manual, fire is one of the most common resistances that creatures have. But that being said, there was one spell that kind of caught my eye that we're talking about this, and that's Fire Shield, which
very underrated fire spell, in my opinion.
Very underrated, but
very unique.
It is, I think, the only one that I read through besides like Elemental Weapon. Elemental Weapon, of course, cast it on a weapon, add an extra d4 of whatever elemental damage type you choose. Pretty simple.
Magic Weapon, but better.
Slightly.
The Magic Weapon spell was one of my low point spells.
But Fire Shield actually specifically said you do fire damage unless you're using the cold variation of it, in which case you do cold damage.
Which is interesting that a spell called Fire Shield would have a cold variant.
Right. I think the survey in my actually kind of touching on this was a little lacking because the rankings were, very dissatisfied, slightly dissatisfied,
and then the same,
and then the same for the satisfied or not applicable. When it's like, I like these spells for different reasons, or I dislike these spells for different reasons, and like I might be, and that was my problem. I was finding myself going through and going, this spell is fine. Or this, there's very few instances where I went, that spell is bad or that spell is good.
There was no properly rated or adequate or neutral option, which
right.
I did find slightly frustrating.
Or I just needed a space and not just at the end. Like there was a text box at the end, like you said, but like you mentioned it, Chain Lightning, great spell. Way too high level. I needed something in that survey to let me say that, like, oh, this is good, but I don't want to, wait till I have 5th level spells, or maybe this spell is good if it were bumped to damage die.
Agreed. The survey was done in pages of about 8 to 10 spells per page, and then you had to rate them. Having a text box at the bottom of each one of those pages so that you could call out these spells specifically would be a lot better than having to wait all the way to the end. Because I'm sure I had a lot of thoughts while I was filling it out that I just simply forgot by the time I got to the end. And that's just kind of a flaw in setting up the survey. But I mean, a survey is a survey. It's always going to be flawed, and it's always going to have to be taken with a grain of salt. Some other spells. Let's talk spells that stand out to us as particularly bad spells right now. And I've got a couple here on my list, but I want to point out 5 spells in particular.
All right, let's go for it.
True Strike and Resistance. We'll put those together. Cantrips, resistance is concentration, True Strike concentration, to simply either gain resistance to a damage type for one attack for one person, or in the case of True Strike, to get advantage on an attack for one person, yourself, in the case of True Strike. And the math is very, very clear that pretty much doing literally anything else other than casting those spells is going to be more efficient use of your turn.
Oh, yeah, because if you look at True Strike specifically, it says it's an action. You cast the spell, and you get advantage on the next attack against a target. Or I could attack the target once this turn, and I could attack it once next turn, and have the same number of die rolls. Yes.
Advantage is you get 2 die rolls. Making 2 attacks over 2 turns is still 2 die rolls, and there's the benefit that you could hit twice. True Strike is just genuinely the worst. And short of like, all right, I need everyone to roll initiative, and you guys manage to like get a spell off before initiative starts, maybe, but you shouldn't be taking up one of your cantrip slots with something like that. Same with resistance. You shouldn't be spending your concentration and your action to simply give one person resistance to damage for one attack. They're really not that great. Now, if they were, say, bonus action cantrips, which I do not believe there is a bonus action cantrip.
No, I believe you're correct. I believe most
if those spells were simply bonus action cantrips, suddenly I feel like they would be top tier cantrips that like must takes in a lot of situations. If they were concentration, maybe less so. But if you don't have a concentration spell up and you're casting, you say as a bonus action, you cast the cantrip True Strike, and then you cast Disintegrate, you suddenly have advantage on your Disintegrate. Now, that kind of catapults these spells into must takes, and I'm sure Wizards would not want to do that. It seems like they're purposefully staying away from the bonus action cantrip for some reason, and I don't think I would really want that.
Yeah.
But that's the only way I could see these spells really being viable, short of just a complete rework on what they actually do. The other 3, well, I have a pair of spells and then one more. Okay. The next pair of spells, 2 find spells, specifically find traps and find the path. Is there any reason to cast find traps over simply checking for traps?
There's an argument that can be made, So I know in previous versions of D&D, in original versions, only rogues or roguelike characters could check for traps. Like that was a special thing you could do with your class. And so I think that check for traps, you could you could make the argument to say maybe no one has good investigation, or it's just the easiest thing to do. But no, I agree with you. I would not take it. I would not cast it.
Agreed. Checking for traps doesn't require a resource. It requires a roll and an action. Casting a spell slot to find non-magical traps, I might add. The find trap spell does not help distinguish any magical sort of trap. A glyph of warding it would not find. It only finds actual, real, physical, mechanical traps. And then find the path. If you have a good DM that is willing to help you out, which every DM should. The goal should be, we're going to tell the story, we're going to have a good time. Having your characters just constantly get lost because they don't know where the fuck they're going, unless it is a plot point of like a location and they buy into it, you don't need find the path. And there's a lot of better ways to find out that information.
I think find the path might also be something from antiquity. I mean, again, more like if you think about it, in original D&D, it was your dungeon master would have a dungeon, like a literal dungeon, and that would be the whole thing. You started in town, you heard about the dungeon, you went to the dungeon, you went through the dungeon, and so that being the goal is to get through the dungeon, and that's how you track your progress. How many rooms did we make it through? If your DM's throwing extra rooms in there or trap rooms or things like that, you might want to take that. But yes, as a modern D&D system where maps are more of a supplement as opposed to a necessity.
Yeah.
I think that you are again correct that find the path not super helpful.
Not super helpful. The last spell that I have, this is more of an example spell for a category. Cordon of Arrows. For the category of Ranger exclusive spells. I love the Ranger, and I love the concept and theory behind cordon of arrows. You take your arrows, you stick them in the ground, you put some magic juju on them, and if a target comes within range of those arrows, they immediately zip up and they shoot at them. Why would a Ranger cast pretty much any spell that requires an action when they could simply shoot their arrows? Now, cordon of arrows I like. It's setting a trap. It's fun. It's neat. The damage, but I mean, it's an arrow. It's fine. There are a lot of Ranger spells, particularly of first and second level, that require an action, that in pretty much any instance, you just mathematically would be, again, much like True Strike and Resistance, you're just mathematically better just shooting your arrows. Especially as a half-caster with delayed spell casting, you're going to have extra attack before you're going to have access to third and fourth and fifth level spells where you can get really good spells like your Conjure Volley or Conjure Barrage. The lower level Ranger spells, very underwhelming. I think they need a rework, with the exception of really Hunter's Mark. Though I'm in the camp that Hunter's Mark should truly be Ranger exclusive. Take it off the Paladin, the Vengeance list?
Yes, I believe so.
And make it not concentration. But that's just me. That was that's kind of a vague category, but I really love the Ranger. And I know the Ranger's going to get a lot of reworks here for 5.5, and I just really want them to be a top tier class because I want to play them more.
Yeah, Ranger has been in the meme category of classes for a long time now, just because, again, the concept is there probably for an older edition, and the rework has never really been done. But yeah, I think that one of the interesting ones that I did see on the Ranger list is, I believe it's Ranger specific, is Swift Quiver.
Swift Quiver, yes.
Yep. It brought into perspective two things for me. One, it allows you to fire twice. Mm-hmm. Good, very good at low levels. But the other one that it brought in is something that
I would like to point out. Swift Quiver, 5th level spell.
Is it?
Yes.
Then why?
It basically allows you to attack a third time instead of just the normal extra attack 2 attacks. I would argue for a Ranger, you can let him attack 5. You can let him attack 5 times, and it would be balanced.
Another thing from, I think, Antiquity is the resource tracking of it gives you infinite ammo.
Yep.
I don't know anybody that actually tracks ammo unless it's like special ammo.
Yes. I have a gunslinger in my long-running Magitech campaign, and I do my best to try and keep him honest about keeping track of his ammunition, because in our world, firearms are exceptionally rare, with the exception of one nation's army that has specialists that have guns. So it's not, you can't go into a weapon shop or a firearm shop. Firearm shops don't exist. So he has to often craft a lot of his. A lot of my characters in that campaign like to have a little bit of craftiness, one of those words. They like to craft. I have a forge cleric. I have a sorcerer that has a backstory where they come from a Magitech manufacturing family and all that kind of stuff. So I'll have him keep track of it as he's creating also a couple different types. He has a couple different types of guns. A cartridge-based ammunition that actually functions like a modern bullet versus like a loose powder and ball bearing style bullets that you would have to load into like a musket style thing, as well as special arcane things that we haven't quite gotten to yet. So keep an eye out for that, Quentin.
Well, the last section of the survey was, have you cast this as a player, as a DM, or not at all?
When I got to that section, I was very pleased, because I feel like that kind of really is going to put in perspective these opinions that everyone is going to be submitting on this survey. Casting a spell as DM versus a player, very, very different expectations. Mm-hmm. I think they're going to get a lot of information on spells like Purify Food and Drink, or Create Destroy Water, or Control Weather, or those kind of things that most people haven't cast them. Mm-hmm. And when you really think about it, a spell like Create Food and Water or Purify Food and Drink breaks world building in a lot of sense. Why would there be a world that has starvation if you can cast a fairly low level spell to just create water? And I'm sure that there would be people, and you might be able to tie it in that there are these altruistic people that are going out and casting this spell a lot, so to help the starving masses. But it takes away a little bit of your gritty realism and takes the lowest class of society and kind of brings them up to an unrealistic level, that would kind of pull me out.
I mean, on that same note, I think Tasha's actually even takes it more into the fantasy because it points out that the cities and the farmers even might, maybe that's a whole thing they do. There's a image in Tasha's where a farmer is casting magic missile shaped as chickens to defend his farm. And they say maybe the army teaches all of their new recruits to cast low-level spells. So if a troll gets within 120 feet of a wall, 17 guys just let loose a magic missile all over the place, and the troll is no longer an issue. But yeah, that kind of, a lot of these spells are there to take away the thought process almost of resource handling.
Resource management.
Yes, management of like the rations, of the ammunition. And that might not just been a thing that was, it's a large system. D&D is itself a large system and has many forms, and through the years has changed so much that, again, a lot of these things have probably been brought in from antiquity. Some have been put in like, oh, they might need these to make your life easier down the way. For what it is, yes, a lot of that it would be really hard to do a gritty realism campaign and tell your players, hey, you can't take purify food and water. That's not a spell.
Yeah. I mean, if you're doing a gritty realism campaign, there's going to be a lot of spells that you need to address, like Goodberry, for example. But
it's always something you should discuss with your players before you just start eliminating things from their game.
Agreed. Let's discuss the highs from the spell list. Because there are a lot, some of them possibly, I don't have any, but possibly borderlining on overpowered.
Okay.
I don't think that there is truly any spell in D&D that is objectively overpowered, with one exception. Well, two, technically. Wish, obviously. But that's the whole point of the spell.
Right.
I think Polymorph needs and I'm sure people are going to hate it, needs a little bit of reworking and probably a little limitation. Bumping it up to a 5th level spell, keeping it the same, or reduce the types of things you can transform into. I am firmly in the I don't like Polymorph camp, not because it's a bad spell. It's a very, very good spell. For me, my casters, it doesn't seem like something that I would want to do. Very utility, very good in combat, but Polymorph is like the really, truly only overpowered spell in my mind. You can make an argument for Healing Word, bonus action healing that can pop people up from 0, but I think that's just part of the mechanics and design of death in the game. I feel like Polymorph is the one spell that could truly be eliminated and would fix a lot of problems that come up in D&D games, quote unquote problems. Or could handle a good rework to kind of tone it down a little bit. More like the Druid Wild Shape, where it's a bit more limited in the types of things at certain levels that you can transform into, reduce the challenge rating, and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Beyond that, what are some of your favorite spells that you saw? What spells do you really like?
So as I was reading through, I actually found one that I hadn't somehow I had never seen before, and I've looked over the player's handbook many times.
I think we might both have this one on the list. What is it?
What was yours? Mine was it Gates and Corridors?
Oh no!
Yeah, I had not that one. I had never seen that one, and again, I've looked over. Of course, there are now 500 some spells in D&D. Yeah. That one, it's a spell to create your own lair almost.
I mean, between that and Guards and Wards,
those
spells just kind of are, in my mind, DM spells for how to logic your way through magical lairs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that was a spell.
Yeah,
I thought you were going to say Circle of Power.
Oh no, I knew Circle of Power.
What?
Yeah.
I knew about a lot of the aura spells. And I knew about like Teleportation Circle and Magic Circle. Did not know about the Circle of Power. Which, by the way, incidentally, a great spell. For those of you like me that did not know what Circle of Power was, 5th level Abjuration, a little bit high level. Concentration up to 10 minutes. I presume this is a Paladin spell. 30-foot radius, self. Till the spell ends, the sphere moves with you, centered on you, Friendly creatures in the area, including you, have advantage on saving throws against spells and other magical effects. And if they succeed on a spell that is a save or half damage spell, they take no damage instead. Resistance to magic damage, very, very good. That's why there's a lot of min-maxing builds that you find on YouTube and such, where they're talking up the Yanti, they're talking up the Satyr, these naturally magic resistant races. Circle of Power. I liked it. I didn't know that it existed. In hindsight, if it's a Paladin exclusive spell at 5th level, much like Swiftquiver, probably never going to see it in actual play.
Right.
But a good spell. What are some of your good spells? What do you like?
I don't know if I have any that I would pick out off the top of my head that again that aren't just already very popularized.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Bless is a great spell.
Great.
Bane is a great spell. I mean, they're just polar opposites.
Aforementioned Healing Word.
Yeah, I don't think I have too many that just stood out to me that said I've never cast this spell and I really, really want to. I mean, there are some spells that are super cool, not in the DM, not in the PHB. For example, the Illusory Dragon.
Yes. We've experienced the Illusory Dragon in a one-shot.
Yes.
Ours.
It was neat.
It was neat. Also, the very first TikTok on our TikTok page.
That is true. That is very true.
Is me recording Darren describing how his Illusory Dragon tears a hole in the fabric of reality and steps through into a desert.
Yeah.
So that's fun.
That was fun.
Feel free to spend a couple minutes scrolling on our TikTok page to find that out. Some of my favorite spells, standout spells. Some of them, very, very popular. Counterspell.
Of course.
Crucial. Love Counterspell. I love the limitations of Counterspell. It doesn't just, of equal or lesser value, it does. Just cancel the spell. Counter it, if you will. Unlike the Magic the Gathering version of Counterspell, which just negates anything. Fucking hate that card. Ruins all of my strategies in MTG Arena. Fly, a classic.
Fly.
Great spell. Greater invisibility as well as regular invisibility.
Lovely spells.
Disguise Self, great spell. Featherfall, niche, very useful. Very good. Reaction spells in general, I'm a big fan of.
Reaction spells are good. Featherfall, I will say, depending on the setting of the campaign, like if you're in a city campaign or maybe a floating city campaign where you got like tall structures, you need a quick getaway, just jump off the building.
Yep. As I'm talking about reaction spells, obviously Shield.
Love Shield.
Absorb Elements, great spells. Must have for Eldritch Knights, must have for Arcane Trickster Rogues, must have for Bladesinger Wizards.
I think really every wizard should take this Shield spell.
Yeah, that's fair. That's very fair. That is very astute observation. Thank you. Underrated, oft forgot, unless you are playing a Tiefling, Hellish Rebuke.
Oh, I love Hellish Rebuke. Also, Warlock spell.
Love Hellish Rebuke. Great spell.
Again, a reaction spell.
Love reaction spells.
And a reaction spell that does damage.
My favorite reaction spell is a 6th level spell.
Okay.
It is in Xanathar, so it's not part of this list. But Soul Cage.
Soul Cage.
So fucking cool. It is thematic. It evokes imagery that's interesting and evil and cool, and it's a spell that gives you a plethora of options to do with it, and it lasts for a while as well. Big fan of Soul Cage. Make it a 4th level spell, because while it is very powerful, it's not 6th level powerful. It's 4th level powerful. It's no more powerful than Polymorph. We touched on this briefly earlier. Revivify,
yes.
All of the resurrection spells were on the survey.
They were.
What do you think of the resurrection system? Because I've clearly, the reason that they put all of the resurrection spells on the survey is because they want more information on the resurrection system in D&D, especially with the prevalence of Matthew Mercer's version of resurrection, making it a skill challenge, with the exception of Revivify, I believe. No.
I believe mid-combat he doesn't make them do the skill challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, it's strong to call it a system because like the entirety, like obviously combat is a system. It's a very thought out thing. The spell casting system and then just plopped on top of that. I think that the resurrection does need to be more of a system, like the homebrew version Matt Mercer uses. Just because, well, depending on how disposable you want life to be in the campaign. If you want life to stay somewhat sacred, you got to make it a little harder. If you're this is just a meat grinder, and you might, your character's going to go down. So as soon as your cleric hits 5th level, they better have Revivify, and they better save all of their 3rd level spells to do it. That's another thing. But yeah, I think that right now it's just a very simple, they died, they back up. More like a Phoenix down in Final Fantasy.
I would like, there's quite a few resurrection type spells. I really think there should be 2. Revivify, which is your battlefield EMT giving a freaking defibrillator to you to get you back up. I think that's fine. I could see an argument for making it 4th level. 5th level feels like there's probably a lot of people in a world that are 5th level in universe in terms of skill level. And having a spell like Revivify being available to a lot of people just kind of, it again, makes for wacky world building. And I think the other one that should exist is True Resurrection. And that should be it. A ninth level, extremely powerful. There's only going to be like less than 5 people in the world that can cast this, of an extremely expensive spell that is basically going to be reserved for personal high clerics of like a king and maybe a high priest of a church. And then, of course, your godlike player characters. Making it, I think the cost, because a spell like Resurrection, I've always felt that it really just feels like a use a spell slot and you can turn money into life. All of these spells. Revivify, I think, is fine as is because of the very, very tight time limit to it. But all of the other resurrection spells do just kind of feel like spend money, you have life again. And I think that really should only be reserved for the highest possible type of that, which would be True Resurrection. Because I think if you die, they can't defibrillate you back to life on the battlefield. Make a new character. Or maybe make it a quest for the rest of the party and a temporary character to go find someone that can cast True Resurrection or gather the funds or influence to make that happen,
I think if it were that way, that actually might bring up, if you were to eliminate what is the mid-level resurrection spell?
Resurrection.
I thought it was Raise Dead.
Raise Dead. Raise Dead, I also think should get a little bit of a tweak to make it more of a necromancy specific spell.
I think it might bring up it might lift up the number of players who are choosing to take things like Spare the Dying and Gentle Repose.
It would make those spells more worth taking by the nature of that small tweak to the resurrection system would make these lower tier spells that we didn't talk about previously worth taking more. And I completely agree with that. On the subject of Raise Dead, I think it would be interesting to make Raise Dead make it like more of a necromancy style thing where you can reanimate a dead. Well, there is kind of that spell of reanimating.
Yeah, it's yeah.
But to really hammer that home, maybe Raise Dead is going to be a proper resurrection spell to raise a fallen party member that has been expired for a little while. Maybe pull something like the Hollow One from Wildmount. Maybe give them a lasting ramification sign of that death that like stays with them. And they can get an interesting feature like a Frightening Presence because they are literally an undead at that point. And make that a story moment. I would love that if Raise Dead had a little bit more of an impact, made a person more undead. And that's the drawback. You weren't able to get like defibrillator shocked back to life. Your party didn't magically preserve your corpse. Your party wasn't able to stop you from dying in the first place with a Spare Dying or a Healing Word. And because you all are not high enough level to truly resurrect a dead person, here's a lasting impact of that moment for the rest of the game.
I think that on the spell side of things, one thing I do like that Wizards of the Coast has done, and probably earlier versions of the game have done, is they've given the mechanical how-tos of the spell, and then maybe a little bit of extra like flavor text, which has actually, I did the side story first. So giant insect, the spell.
Oh, I fucking hate that spell.
Yes, I know. I would.
It's also not that good.
It's not that good. You should just take summon
Anything.
Summon anything.
Anything from Tasha's instead.
But the spell says you select so many of a different type of insect in the area, and you can make them giant insects. You make a bee, make like 5 bees into giant wasps. Whatever.
What if you're on the ocean?
I guess you could make lobsters into giant.
What if you're scorpions in a desert? What if you're at the top of a mountain?
But exactly. Well, the thing is that the system tries to put in maybe limitations. I don't know if that's the idea, or just maybe somebody was just trying to have fun and add flavor. But then it really annoyed me when my players were like, "We're fighting giant spiders, right?" I'm like, "Yes, you are currently there are 3 giant spiders right in front of you. They were actually phase spiders. That's not important."
Love phase spider. Hate a phase spider. I love the phasing part where they go away.
But the idea is you grow these insects, and then they're under your control. So they're like, "Oh, I just cast a spell, and they're under my control." I looked at it and said, "No, that's not how the spell works. This is taking small ones and making them big." To that point, when they add a lot of flavor, or when they try to, make the spell story implemented or story implementing, I think that brings confusion and general gross feeling when you're trying to take the spell.
Yeah.
Not in the survey, because it's in Tasha's, I believe. One that I really hate is, I believe it's called Dream of the Blue Veil.
Well, the thing about Dream of the Blue Veil is that it is literally, it's not, if you're a player, you're not supposed to take that spell.
Exactly. It should be in a module, and that's it. Actually, that brings up a point I would like to speak on, unless you have anything else. Okay, I do think that there should be, not necessarily keeping spells hidden from players, but kind of keeping spells back in the DMG. Some of them.
I completely agree with that. Take guards and wards, your gates and corridors, your Dream of the Blue Veil, the spells that are clearly meant to be DM spells. Nistel's Magic Aura, for example, as well.
They and maybe even some more powerful spells like that a player would want. And this actually ties into how I feel about magic items. Some of the magic items should be in the PHB. Things that you can, like, hey, if your DM allows it, look, you know of these things. Same with the spells. Look, you know of some of these spells. Maybe the details are kept in the DMG, but this is a quest. This is a reward. This is something that the players can work for and quest for to actually get, which, I would love to give my players more spells as rewards. Like, oh, you're a wizard and you worked really hard. Maybe you did the research. Maybe you studied on this guy for a long time. All right, I guess you can have this spell that you were planning on taking anyway next turn for free.
Yeah.
But instead being able to be like, hey, you did the thing, you put in the work. Here's a spell that's not necessarily readily available to you.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like a podcast in the near future where there isn't any big D&D related news going on, we could get really into the weeds of magic items and spells and how to hand out outside of leveling benefits to your players. I'm a big fan of free spells. I'm a big fan of free feats, as we can get into in another podcast.
Write that down for the next podcast.
I completely agree. There should be a spells section in the DMG for DM specific spells. And I would argue that there are some spells like maybe hold back Wish and True Resurrection and make that something they have to earn outside of simply just I'm 17th level now. That's a really good suggestion, Sam. You did good. We need to contact the Wizards of the Coast D&D development team.
Wizards of the Coast, if you're watching right now,
they aren't.
They aren't. No.
We had a little bit of we had something at the end, but we're about an hour and 10 minutes into our recording session. I think this is a good place to simply take any inquiries that we find in the TikTok Live comment section.
Sure.
If you want to submit a question, comment, or concern to the podcast, you can tweet at us at the Dungeon Bros. You can join our Discord server. There's an entire text channel for podcast-related questions where we will answer. But for now, we will check out the comment section on our TikTok Live, and we'll answer any of those questions. Any good ones?
All right. Well, we have Joe Vaney Lolman. He says, I fell bad for you, other guy on Fortnite. Don't know what that means. Brandon Lafferty 09 says, I think the game needs more elemental damage dealing spells other than fire.
Agreed.
Very
much agreed.
I played a Descent into Avernus Sorcerer and took Transmute Metamagic to replace fire damage, which interestingly enough, actually in Tosh's, the College of Scribes Wizard also has an ability specifically to transmute spell damage.
Mm-hmm. As we discussed earlier, my Wizard Lucian in your campaign, there are several spells that he has that are not proper D&D spells because they are simply D&D spells with a lightning damage type coat of paint over top of them.
Mm-hmm.
The Voltaic Bolt, for example. It's just Firebolt, but it's lightning instead of... Why is there not... Oh my gosh, why is there not a lightning damage dealing cantrip in D&D?
Shocking Grasp?
That shoots a bolt of lightning.
Well,
Shocking Grasp is...
Yeah,
it's fine. Shocking Grasp is fine. Very overrated. Chill Touch, fine. Overrated. Even though it's not even a touch spell.
No, nor is it a chill spell. It's not a cold spell either.
Why there isn't I want to shoot a fucking lightning bolt at someone that is just a cantrip is beyond me why that doesn't exist already. It should. Moving on.
All right. Randy Rizzo, True Strike should allow you to pull a modifier if you hit. Like, what's the monster's wisdom modifier or strength mod?
Oh, so that's kind of a monk. Well, actually, no, not a monk thing. This is a Cobalt Soul Monk. This is a homebrew class from Critical Role. The Cobalt Soul Monk has a feature like that where when they hit with a flurry of blows, they get a list of stat information from the monster that they hit. That is an interesting addition.
Give it an additional utility.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if that would make it worth taking, as it's still an action, and you would have to commit 2 rounds to simply get advantage on an attack and then learn some information. I think if they made True Strike a bonus action spell, removed the advantage from the attack, and simply made it, if you hit on an attack or spell this turn, you can learn one of these things. I think that would make it interesting.
I think that would too.
I don't know if that's True Strike at that point. I think you just have a nice, interesting cantrip there. But I like where your head's at.
Something we should look at in the future is that chart you have that you found of upgraded non-damage cantrips.
Yes, I believe I found the download for it on Reddit, but if you search on Google or your search engine of choice for D&D cantrip leveling on Reddit, it lists pretty much all of the non-damage dealing cantrips, and much like how the damage dealing cantrips get an extra die at certain levels of damage, these cantrips get expanded uses as you level up. Like Dancing Lights lets you shed slightly more light, and then by the time you're all the way up, Dancing Lights, you can form your Dancing Lights into a glowing humanoid form. Expands the uses of like Prestidigitation and Thaumaturgy. I believe it makes True Strike and Resistance like kind of okay by tacking on a whole lot of extra shit. But yeah, look into that. Look into that. If you are on the YouTube video version of this podcast, I'm going to make a note here. You can find it in a link in the description of the YouTube video for the podcast.
Randy Rizzo 0 says when we were talking about Cordon of Arrows is more or less, as I see it, a prep spell for large hordes set in your vantage point. Yeah. Which, yeah, I kind of wish there were maybe more spells like that. It would not totally change, but it would give another option for how you could run combat encounters. Because you guys, I mean, you can run it right now. You see them coming. They are you know that they're going to come through here. You can ambush them, sure, but besides getting your surprise round, if everybody jumps down and attack and somebody casts it, like there's not that many trap spells or like prep spells necessarily.
Yeah, proper trap spells.
Proper trap spells, yeah.
I've always loved the like implicit flavor of ranger spells where they're fitting it into the spell casting mechanic for the mechanics of it, but a lot of them do really read to me as just like cool powers that the ranger has and is able to do of setting traps with arrows. And they make the like logical mechanics of it simple by being like, you stab it into the ground and magic happens.
Mm-hmm.
I love that spell. If it dealt just like a little bit more damage, had a little bit wider radius of effect, very good.
Be tasty.
Big fan. And even as a like right before initiative thing, it'd be great. You set it at your feet and then you're a ranger, and if something's coming up to attack you physically, they're going to take damage when they approach you, sort of a thing. The more I talk about it, the less it sounds like one of the low spells that I have on my list. I just really like the ranger, and I find a reason to make their spells pretty decent. So,
I mean, the ranger has, again, historically been one of those that everybody wants to rewrite for, and yet here we are without it.
The Xanathar subclasses, I really do think make the ranger good. Like, legitimately good. Period. Not great. They're good.
They're good.
Moving on.
Last one here from Shrek Has Chlamydia.
Get out of my swamp.
And it sure is swampy. Might sting a little too.
No. Oh man, I hope Shrek Has Chlamydia is still watching, because that's a fucking username right there. Jeez.
Shrek Has Chlamydia asks us how to make actual challenges in campaign with a 20 level party.
20th level party.
That's...
The easy answer is Tarask. But I feel like the Tarask isn't very interesting.
Honestly, that is something we would have to go away, come back, and do basically an entire podcast on.
Yeah, that is a very broad question, because it also a level 20 wizard and a level 20 cleric are very, very different from a level 20 fighter and a level 20 ranger and a level 20 monk. 20th level spell. If you have a party of 20th level spellcasters, good fucking luck.
Yeah.
Pretty much nothing is going to be a challenge for them if they picked good spells. The best way to challenge a very, very high level party, broad strokes, don't make an enemy that can be defeated by hit point damage.
Mm-hmm.
Give them hit points, and then if the players break through a threshold, maybe the enemy is stunned or can't take legendary actions for a round or two, some sort of effect. But to defeat them, they need to accomplish a task. The Vecna fight at the end of Campaign 1 of Critical Role is a great idea of that, of setting the trammels and then having to recite a magic tome to send him away to beyond the Divine Gate. I love that idea. Very, very balancing very high level encounters is very difficult. And again, we could do an entire podcast, but I think if you're a broad strokes approach, removing damage as the way to defeat the enemy would be a great place to start.
And then, I mean, just kind of general advice when it comes to like an adventuring day or how a campaign day could go. If you're just letting your party go Nova on, or if you're putting the monster in front of a fully rested party, they're going to go Nova. They're going to use all their powers and abilities and skills and wipe that thing out quick. Part of it is going to be that lead up. How are you going to get them to expend some of their resources so that when they get to that fight, they're not just killing it immediately.
Another great way, make it as I believe we discussed briefly on the last episode or some episode at some point. It may have been the first episode. Make your boss a multi-stage boss. If you've played any Final Fantasy before, you know what that is. The smaller stage, they're humanoid still, and you're fighting, and then they beat him. And then he's like bigger and like a monster, and then you might beat him. And then maybe like one final showdown again with like a souped up version of the little humanoid, or maybe just the big monster is good enough. Again, an example that you can see in Critical Role. of the end of campaign 2. Spoilers if you have not watched campaign 2 yet. But kind of like the 2-tiered fight against Mollymok. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. That's look at your favorite video games, look at your favorite other sorts of media, and you'll definitely see some suggestions of how you got these high level characters, how to actually challenge them.
My favorite video game series of all time, Kingdom Hearts. They love doing that of you fight this version of the bad guy, and then you fight this version of the bad guy, and then you fight this version of the bad guy, all in the same boss fight. The entire final boss of Kingdom Hearts 2 is like 5 bosses in sequence. And in a D&D setting where you have limited resources that you can't easily heal through or that don't regenerate like in a video game, it's going to really test these high-level players because they're going to have access to pretty much anything they want. They're going to have dope magic items. The spellcasters are going to have a massive number of spell slots, in addition to like literally world-bending and changing magic that can affect society. So yeah, multi-stage, maybe ignore hit points as the main means of defeating. Any other comments?
No, that's it.
That is all that they wrote. That's all she wrote. That's all he wrote.
It's all anyone wrote.
That's all they wrote. That's all.
It's all
whatever
wrote.
You
have to do it from memory.
Whatever pronoun you prefer, I don't really care. With that being said, I believe that brings us to our end here, about an hour and 20 minutes into this recording session. Probably not the if you look currently at the time left in this episode, you might say, Connor, you haven't been going for an hour and 20. You're going for however long this episode is. Yeah, because I edit it.
That's how that works.
Yeah, we say a lot.
Yeah, working on that. Gotten a little better.
I mean, it's not difficult to cut out. You do you. Regardless, this has been episode 3 of the Dungeon Bros podcast. You can find us on TikTok at Dungeon Bros YT. That is where we post most of our content. We have some good stuff up there. You can find us on YouTube as well at the Dungeon Bros. We post the podcast. We do some reposts. We're going to do some YouTube exclusive content here in the near future. Hopefully, if we get around to that.
We have some plans.
You can find us on Twitter. It's a great place to interact with us if you have questions that you want read on the podcast. We also have a Twitch account that you will be able to follow eventually for live streaming content when we get to that, as well as you can join our Discord server. All of those links are going to be in the description of the YouTube video. You can also find it in the link tree in our TikTok, and Sam is gesturing to me that we do, in fact, have another comment.
I think this is perfect to end the podcast on, or maybe just the live stream.
Very good.
And this is, again, from Shrek Has Chlamydia.
Shrek
Has Chlamydia says, love you guys. Thank you for this amazing podcast. Shrek Has Chlamydia, thank you.
Thank you, and I hope you find something to get that cleared up. Make sure that you disclose that with your sexual partners. We need to have a podcast about D&D STDs and how to implement that.
I guess I'll go write something.
The great foil of the bard. See you guys.
In the meantime, peace out.